Welcome everybody to the Jazz Kitchen. Today will be talking about jazz and all things jazz, caloric intake, all the good stuff. But first, today's episode is brought to you by air. Don't forget to breathe. Anyways, moving on here, I will be now bringing in my guest today. This will be Stell. Stell is joining us all the way from the other room. So today we will be talking about jazz and why it's the most slept on topic or slept on genre of music.
I heard about half of that. I don't want to ruin your podcast, but you said that.
Yeah, I don't understand why my mic's not picking up. Well, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties right now. I might have to scream into the mic a little bit. So there we go.
Talk.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me?
I heard can you.
Hello. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this good? Okay, cool. Now that we're rolling, we're talking about jazz.
Did you want to refilm your intro?
Nope, already did that. My intro was without you. I deafened myself. But anyways, so we're gonna be talking about
sorry.
this. It's all good, all good. So we're gonna be talking about this. Jazz.
You like jazz? Don't put that in.
It's gonna be in there. It's a podcast.
You're not gonna edit it?
Nope. But
Oof.
I'm going to start with this. It's a quote from the 12th edition jazz history book, written by Paul O. W. Tanner and David W. McGill. It's a great book. Out of there, they wrote in there, passive listening will not bring intelligent musical enjoyment. Rather, such enjoyment is fostered through active participation that includes understanding, careful listening, and emotional response. Now that's pretty powerful stuff. Like, jazz isn't just something you can casually put on in the back. I mean, it is, but it's not something that you can really get a good fulfillment out of it, of just like leaving it on in the background. You actually have to be listening to it, you know.
Mhm.
So it's kind of unlike a lot of other music. You really have to be listening to it to really enjoy it. Like, you can throw something, I don't know, like come swinging out here like some rap or something, you know, just something that's got a beat. It's just gonna be going on in the back. You're not really paying attention to it as much. Just something you can work to. But jazz really, I find myself a lot of times even just getting distracted from what I'm doing when I'm listening to jazz.
It's interesting. That quote more describes later jazz, because when jazz, like the big band era, when it was popular in the 1940s, it was popular music. It wasn't like sit down, dive into it, intellectual music. It was dance music that was just kind of everywhere to dance to because it was popular and you wanted to hear it exactly how it was on the record because that's how it was. And then when you got into bebop and cool, this kind of like post 1940s, post pop music scenario, it became more intellectual with that quote. So it's very interesting because it hasn't always been like that, you know?
Yeah, it has quite the history to it, and part of that, I mean, it's really cool how jazz isn't measured by, like, you know, so much as I don't know, like it talks about like the timeline and whatnot, and how it's more measured by the people and the styles rather than like more so time rather than you kind of catching that. It's kind of confusing. It's weird, but it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Jazz has quite the history.
Yep. But that's not what we're here to talk about, is it?
No, we are talking about why jazz is heavily slept on, if not actually the most slept on genre there is. So, yeah, awkward.
Well, a lot of people, when they hear jazz, they either A, think of the B movie right away,
Yeah, you
which is
like
like,
jazz.
ugh. Um, or they think of like 1940s, like Benny Goodman or whatever, like in the mood, ba ba doo da da da, and it's like, okay, but that's not all there is to it.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Or when
Just
people think of jazz, they think about elevator music, which don't get me wrong, I love
or
elevator
or
music.
that good smooth jazz or Kenny G
Yeah,
as they'd say,
Kenny
you know,
G. Blah,
yeah, the
do
dreamy kind of
do do.
like they're playing across the room for me kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, jazz is more than that, and I think that's kind of your point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
there's like a lot, like as a genre itself, it's very very diverse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have I mean there's a great thing here that I also wrote down. It's a quote out of the Jazz Word, a book written by Don Seriuli, Bert Cornell, and Mort Nastir. They said there need be no mystery about jazz, but each listener has a right, even a duty, to be discriminating. So it's kind of like you get to decide what you like and what you don't like, and that's okay because there's no like one set thing on what jazz is. It's such a diverse genre of music.
Mm-hmm. So when you say most slept on, does that mean you think people our age should be listening to jazz? First part of the question. Second part of the question, what do you mean jazz as an entirety or specific pockets of style?
I'm more so talking about the overall, and I yeah, I believe like more people, more kids, so to say, should be people. It's late. Should be listening to jazz. It's honestly such like the most music that we listen to these days comes from jazz or some form of jazz. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's all sorts of new people coming up, like Christian Scott, who he describes his music as stretch music because it's a hybrid sound of hybrids of other music and all sorts of other types of jazz and like other cultural music from around the world, just different rhythms and whatnot from that.
What's your opinion on rappers and such who take samples from 1940s stuff and then remix it with some new drum machine stuff and add words over it? What do you think of that?
Well, it certainly adds a quite a bit of layering to it. Like it kind of exposes people to jazz. I know there's a lot of like bops, shall we say, that really like a lot of people love them, and they have like these bits of say like a Benny Goodman show or just some Miles Davis, you know, just some real good or Coltrane even just over top, and it's like or modern artists like such as Dan Halligan who just will play over pop tracks. It's just it's something that's been kind of culturally appropriated to be all right and outside. And I mean that's kind of what jazz has been about, is just the progression and expanding and seeing if we can push the limits of what the music can do.
Yeah. Um. Okay. If your goal is to get people listening, do you have a song recommendation? I'm coming up with one.
Ooh, there's a lot, but Miles Davis, super simple. Bye bye. What is it? Bye bye Blackbird. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really
Probably.
good one.
Yeah.
John Coltrane, Blue Train. That's a really good album to listen to. If you want some more avant-garde, maybe some Thelonious Monk, like Straight No Chaser, or even Charles Mingus, Fables of Faubus, a big social commentary on Governor Faubus.
Um. What do I love?
I got a couple more. I mean,
Oh.
Curtis Fuller, he's a really great trombonist. What is it? Wycliffe Gordon? Wycliffe Gordon. Wycliffe Jordan, my bad. I believe also another trombone player. Um, yeah. What about you? What do you say about music?
So I'm a lot of what Trent listed are like classics from like the 40s and 50s. I am more into cool jazz, which came around in the 60s. Really love Other Directions as recorded by Nicola Kant. What else do I like? Oh my gosh, this I guess this kind of counts as Jasmine Wano by Pat Metheny Group.
Yeah, I mean that's still.
So
Oh
good.
yeah, definitely.
Love Minwano. Um, I love what postmodern jukebox does to
Yeah,
kind of derailing it a little bit, taking pop songs and covering them as like 40s, 50s, 60s jazz. I just so good.
yeah, they really do a good job with that. So that's something like those are very popular, and people are like, wow, that's really cool. And it's like such an aesthetic these days that people still enjoy, but nobody really is like, oh man, I'm gonna go listen to like some old big band charts or some bebop music or bop music or just they don't
Ooh,
individually listen to that.
I got another one. Sunflower or Little Sunflower by Freddie Hubbard.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's a good one. Um,
I mean, overall, I think we can say that jazz is about the personal, unique expressions, and um, those performers most remembered by history have always stood above the others as power of their personal expressions, right?
mm-hmm.
You know, so it's about those expressions and everything, and what really stands out to people, and you're listening for whatever you like, and if something catches your ear, you go, wow, that's pretty cool. Like you might hear that in another couple other songs and be like, wow, they kind of like pulled that off.
Yeah, and am I still connected?
Yeah,
Computer,
still good.
excuse me. Sorry, different computer than I'm used to. Um, oh, I think it's really interesting how jazz typically is ensemble music, and yet it was so much about the individual components of that ensemble. Like
Yeah,
we know,
yeah,
because like I feel like a lot of like contemporary artists are very much about one person, about one artist who's like doing it all. But no, it was like if you could have this powerhouse combination of all these different people, and even just changing one like made it different. And the fact that you could like hear, even though there was one ensemble sound, you could hear the individual voices, and each one had very strong personality.
yeah. It's about the communication between the people, and like if you change up whose voice you're hearing, it really changes the overall tone of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You really can see this in Christian Scott's music, as his like all his group is just very tight, and like they're different, and they all come from different backgrounds, yet they can still have an amazing conversation through music.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What
Oh,
else
I'm
could we
sorry,
talk
I
about?
haven't been using my NPR voice.
Your NPR voice.
My NPR voice. Next up on the list, we have.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, any other thoughts?
um, there's a lot to jazz. Not everything is an acorn of the Great American Songbook, but there's a lot out there. There's stuff that you'll listen to and you'll be like, I'm ready to throw up. But there's other stuff that you'll listen to and it's like when you find something that really, really resonates with you, it's just awesome. It's a feeling like no other. I just say, like, put on noise canceling headphones, lay down in a big pile of blankets, and just soak it in on repeat for like 4 hours.
Yeah, there's different flavors for everybody. I mean, everybody likes their own flavors of water, right? But
That
it's
joke is blocked.
yeah, it's a very personal experience, and you can even it's as good as just really good lyrics or really good speaker. You just listen to these things, and they speak to you on a completely different level. Like you get goosebumps, you get chills. It's just such a moving emotional experience, and it's such a great way of storytelling. Like Charles
Yeah.
Mingus really did a great job. Like that's my example here is just Charles Mingus and Fables of Faubus, because I've listened to that song or that chart how many like countless times, and a more recent time I was like really moved, and it was just like super emotional, and you can really feel everything and that's going on and hear the different things, the screams of people, the shouting, the punching, and it's crazy how you can.
Another one, if you want your heart wrenched out of your body, Strange Fruit, as recorded by Billie Holiday. Are you familiar with that one?
I am not. I'll have to give that a listen.
Spoiler alert, the Strange Fruit are black people that have been hung.
Oh wow, Strange
Yeah.
Fruit. Yeah, pretty intense stuff. This jazz.
It's jazz has always been a story about struggle and hardship and handling difference and self-expression and also fighting for yourself. And if you don't know, jazz directly comes from African people and the Africans that were brought here as slaves, and this was their music, and taking their music to a new world and using that to survive the just terror of slavery. And so it's in there, even no matter how many like white people you see playing jazz, it's still there's that story of slavery buried in it.
Yeah, it did start off. It's as American as apple pie. I don't know if apple pie is very American, but it's very American. Started off with African American culture and evolved very just a lot, and took many turns and branched off in a lot of directions. And really back then, or way back, way back, way back, anything other than classical was jazz. So you had this giant umbrella of music that then just kept spanning out and spanning out and absorbing. But to lighten it up a little bit,
Sorry.
yeah, no, it's fine. It's a part of jazz. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of history and a lot of strife that came from it. But there can also be like you can be like, wow, very happy. I went down to the store today, got myself a hat, or like you're chilling corner
A
pocket, like
hat.
yeah, you're chilling at the club. Corner pocket. It's right there. Um, Playing pool and whatever, smoky. Or you can have set the ambiance of like a smoky jazz club. You can smell the cigars, just all that.
Jazz is
The
drug
whiskey
music.
coming off the tenor player's breath. Or even just a love song like Misty. What was that? That was sung by Ella Fitzgerald. A great one.
Errol Garner wrote that song about a rainbow, so
Oh, okay. Well then. I mean, there's still it's interpretation, but there's still lots of or polka dots and moonbeams.
hmm
That's a great one, great love song. But yeah, just all sorts of fun variety, and it's very unnoticed by our generations, our current generations. So,
Well, you say that like no one's listening to jazz, but
well, yeah, there's a
in
lot of
your high
people.
school alone, there's over 100 people actively involved in maintaining jazz.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But and I know a few people outside of our band program as well that listen to jazz, and like I've sent them more stuff of like what to listen to, and it's all just some more flavors I've added to their
Spice rack.
to their pot, or to their dish, to their spice rack. And so I've sprinkled some around, but it's just it's not very popular these days. No.
Well, it's not corporate.
Yeah.
You know,
Has
what
it ever?
sells right now is corporate
I no,
music.
you're right. You're right.
And so even though we know that like Runaway with Me by Carly Rae Jepsen has very planned chords and harmonies that sell and a roadmap that sells. And it's
Yeah.
popular because it fits all of those expectations. And that's why a lot of old standards from the 40s sound the same because they were that. But after they stopped being popular culture, they became like a sort of counterculture.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff these days too is very. I mean, not. It's more. It's smaller. You know, combos. You don't see very many big bands. Like, I mean, sure, there's the Gordon Goodwin Big Fat Band that's still like pumping out stuff. But
Tower of
yeah, Tower Power.
Power.
There's still great big groups, but a lot of smaller groups are very popular as well. And it's very a big style that at least that I'm into is more combo esque and like really pulled back and individual and just raw and exposed rather than a big, powerful, like not necessarily high energy, but just a lot of people and a lot of sound coming through. There's a lot more complexity into the fruit I'm eating rather than a lot of just you know one big flavor. It's a lot of intricacies.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and we pushed right over the 20-minute mark, which is a little bit long, and by a little bit I mean a lot bit.
You know, there's some mumbling you can chop if you need to chop.
It's a podcast. I'm not going to chop. But anyways, this has been the Jazz Kitchen. Again, today's episode was brought to you by Air. Remember to breathe. Thanks for listening, and we'll come back to you later with some more jazz talk.